it's just like building a house or starting a new relationship. If your foundation is shaky, then even the most beautiful construction isn't going to matter because everything is going to crumble down the line. It's not going to last. It doesn't have the base, the strength to hold whatever you're going to build on top of it. Welcome to the Ignited Recovery podcast, a new way forward for anyone looking for answers but feeling left out. If you've been searching for empowerment, triumph, and purpose, you've found them right here. You won't hear the same solutions, and you're not going to have any excuses to fall back on, because Ignited Recovery allows heroes to rise and become their best selves. I'm Dr. Adi Jaffe, and I can't wait to be your guide on this journey. Are you ready to become an ignited hero? We've all been hearing about the microbiome and how important it is for our health. It's kind of funny, right? Only 10 years ago, we believed that killing the bacteria on everything was the way to go. I mean, do you remember those sanitizer sprays everywhere? And now we're gradually learning that, surprise, surprise, not really, we actually need the bacteria around us to thrive and even survive. The thing is that everybody's been focusing almost exclusively on the bacteria in your body that helps you digest food. And that is really important because if you can't digest it, you can't live off of the nutrients, and then you develop all sort of GI problems and you have to... Never mind. But research has been showing us an incredible connection between bacteria in your gut and your mental health. Seriously. For instance, studies have shown that the bacteria in the gut of an animal can change its level of depression. And more research is coming out showing that the same exact thing probably plays a role in anxiety, depression, maybe even autism and ADHD. Isn't that amazing? So I did some research and I decided to add a probiotic mix that helps not only mood, but also the communication between my gut and the brain. It's called Amare, and their wellness kit takes care of everything that I need. The probiotics that have been researched to provide actual tangible help, and the prebiotics and everything that those bacteria need to thrive and do their work. I've been using it myself for 3 months, and I gotta say, it's really helped regulate my mood and keep me even. And it's helping me feel less foggy too, especially in the morning. Look, these guys really did their research, and this stuff is top notch. If you want to get it for yourself, just follow the link in our show notes and you can join the mind biome revolution with me. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of the Ignited Recovery Secrets podcast. I'm Adi Jaffe, and I'm really happy to be here with you today to talk about some of the biggest principles that Ignited Recovery operates under. And whether you've read the Abstinence Myth book or not, there are three main principles that I've put together to create the basis of what Ignited Recovery and my approach to helping people who are struggling in life is. And those three principles are: 1, honest exploration; 2, radical acceptance; and 3, individualized transformation. Now, the thing is, almost everybody that I meet wants to jump right into action with tools that they can employ to get themselves better. And that falls under the individualized transformation piece, the third principle. But I don't think that it ever works when you jump right into the tools. And the reason, the analogy I like using is, it's just like building a house or starting a new relationship. If your foundation is shaky, then even the most beautiful construction isn't going to matter because everything is going to crumble down the line. It's not going to last. It doesn't have the base, the strength to hold whatever you're going to build on top of it. And so that's why today I want to discuss with you honest exploration. Because for a lot of us, being honest with ourselves is one of the hardest things that we have to do. And I got this quote from Robert Brault that says, "Every lie is 2 lies. The lie we tell others and the lie we tell ourselves to justify it." And if you stop for a second and think about it, I think that resonates for so many of us, right? I mean, I used to do this in my own life all the time. I would create entire stories in order not to have to truly look inside and see the mess that had been created over time. And not all that mess was my creation. Other people in my life had brought some of that in. I've talked about, walking in on my parents as my dad was walking out because he cheated on my mom, and went away for a few days. That caused this little emotional trauma. I've talked about a little bit of bullying that I'd gone through. I mean, I've talked about a few of these different experiences that had happened, being held at gunpoint, being robbed multiple times while selling drugs, the trauma of some of those experiences. But I really did everything that I could to create a nice, clean narrative around that and move forward. And with a lot of the people that I work with, honest exploration means real discomfort. It means pain. It means being uneasy and working on changing the perspective that you've held for so long. Because honest exploration comes from a place of curiosity and objectivity, not judgment and wounding. And a lot of us have either been judging ourselves forever, sometimes because others have shown us how to do that and do it well, right? And that judgment has just been front and center in our lives over and over and over. Or we've been playing a victim and we've been victimized. Other people have shown us that we're a victim, or we've decided to take on that personality. And so it's not always easy to say, I'm going to put aside that judgment and the wounding and come from a curious, more objective place. Because we've already have a set story that we've been telling for so long. And to say to myself, well, that is my current version of reality, but I'm going to try to move to a different one, can be a huge leap. Now, there are a few different components to doing honest exploration well, and we go through a lot of them in way more depth in my Hero program and with the individual clients that I work with. But I want to give you a glimpse into them here so that you can start applying them in your own life. Sophie and I talk about radical transparency a lot. Honest exploration is like the radical transparency internally that you can do. And when I work with people on honest exploration, I like to start with stories. Stories are so powerful. They've been powerful for humans forever and ever and ever, from allegories to just transmitting the history of our peoples. A lot of the people that I work with, though, ask me why. Why do I have to tell the story? I've told the story over and over and over. But inevitably, what I find is that when you start telling these stories, it opens the door to curiosity in a way that little else does, right? When we tell a story in front of somebody who's reducing judgment for us and allowing us to really be curious about what happened in the story and dive in deep into the nuances and the personalities and the events and the internal processing that happened, all of a sudden we can look at the story from a slightly different vantage point. And so, for instance, I want to talk about one of the clients I have who I started seeing her for drinking, and I work with her and her husband in a relationship. And they've been struggling for years, actually more like a decade. When I came to see her, and I'm not going to use this client's name, but when I first came to see this client, she was drinking heavily. She would black out 3 or 4 days every week. High performing, mega successful woman. She kicked ass at work and would week after week after week. And drinking was actually a big part of her work culture. So, she came to me because one of the things that she knew and loved about my approach is that I don't require that people quit. She was like, okay, this person is going to teach me how to drink responsibly. I've told this story before many, many times, so I'll just let you know. I'll jump to the punchline of her treatment, and she actually decided herself to stop drinking, which was beautiful. And she has now been not drinking for almost 2 years, a little over 2 years. But we just kept hitting a wall when we started working with she and her husband. We kept hitting a wall, and there was no doubt that her stopping to drink improved their situation. But everybody expected everything to get better when the drinking stopped. By the way, that's why I call my book The Abstinence Myth. But we kept hitting a wall, and it wasn't clear to everybody why. The relationship was improving, but it wasn't hitting entirely new levels. We weren't able to just jump, into this radical intimacy and really ways to improve the connection between the two of them, even though they were doing the work and even though they were showing up. And then we were sitting around one day in one of the sessions, and there was a lot of resentment. You could just feel, you could cut, those days where you're talking to people and you can just cut the tension with a knife. It was one of those sessions, one of those days. I personally love those days Because when somebody is at the edge and can't handle much more is when we normally get progress. I don't know if that speaks to you, but I've seen that over and over in my life and the life of my clients. And so we're sitting there and we're talking, and we end up getting to the truth about something that happened to them 7-8 years ago. Now, they have a beautiful child, and this child is about 7 years old now. And the truth started coming out about what happened around her birth. And what happened was, even though they were both successful 7-8 years ago, they both lost their job at the same time. And they lost their job at the same time. They were living in a city that was unfamiliar to them. And they were freaking out. They were freaking out because this woman is pregnant. They're both jobless in a town where their family doesn't live. There's nobody that they really know. And I don't know if you can imagine this, but imagine not knowing where rent is coming next month and you're about to have a baby. So they had to fall into action. And what they did is the only thing that they knew how to do. They reached out to see what was available, and she got hired. There was an opportunity for her that made pretty good money, that would keep them on their feet. But the baby was 2 weeks old. And at 2 weeks old, they had to jump to, right? They literally had to make the decision, okay, you've got to go to work. Otherwise, we don't even know what's going to happen with our life. So she went to work, and that job actually took her internationally. So she was gone for almost a month. And then after that had to move to a different city. I mean, there was upheaval in the relationship, but that's what was needed to keep things at bay. And there's an important fact here, and that is the husband had to stay at home and raise the kid. Now, this was their first child. I've got 3 kids now. I can tell you, when you have your first baby, you have no idea what to do. I mean, when they send you back from the hospital and you put your baby in a child seat and you put them in the car, you're panicking. Because up until that moment, the doctors and the nurses and everybody there was helping you just kind of manage your day to day. And now they go, here's this life, go take them home. Now, this guy was stuck with that, having lost his career and given up, he didn't know for how long, but given up that career in that moment to raise the child so that his wife could go to work. And I would argue that's a pretty amazing, selfless act. And there are a lot of other options that they could have put on the table, but that's the decision they made in that moment of crisis. That's the decision they made to move forward in the best way that they knew how. But the thing is that moment created the next 7-8 years of their lives. And what happened is the woman's career kept blossoming and blossoming and blossoming, and the husband's life kept getting smaller and smaller and smaller as he felt alienated. Because look, there's not a lot of stay-at-home dads. So when he would go to the yard to play with other, to let his kid run around the playground and play, he's the only dad. Everybody else are moms. And so he feels out of sorts. He feels creepy. He doesn't really know what to do. He can't breastfeed. He can't do all the things that may become natural to his mom, to his wife. And he's stuck. But he can't really say anything because they made the decision and her career is blossoming, so he keeps it inside. But the relationship starts suffering and they resent one another and they can't see each other's perspective. And neither my original client nor her husband felt safe enough to talk about this over more than 7 years. And if you've read my book, The Abstinence Myth, this should speak to the story of Terry and some of the other people that I talk about, where these resentments, these fears, these anxieties, these high levels of discomfort that they were experiencing regularly created an entire separation between the two of them. It created this chasm between the husband and the wife, and one that wasn't getting bridged. Nobody was actually doing the work to bridge the gap between the two of them. And so when they're sitting on my couch that day, it was literally the first time in 8 years that they sat there and started processing the real story of what happened 8 years ago. And it wasn't one session. It took a couple of sessions. But as we worked through that story, me asking questions, being curious, leaving the judgment at the door, it became pretty clear to both of them why the last 7 years have felt the way that they felt. It became pretty obvious to both of them why the husband would develop resentment and then feel weird talking about it because he made the choice originally, so he felt like he had to stick with it. And why the wife felt like she was doing everything she could. She was working her butt off. She was successful. She was making money, better money than they've ever made before. And it was causing her resentment in terms of why isn't our relationship improving as I am kicking my own ass, just killing myself to make this family successful. And so they're sitting on opposite sides of the same story, never talking about it, never sharing about it, and feeling resentful and isolated. But the thing is that without the real telling of that story, without the honesty, we wouldn't be able to get past it. We couldn't get to progress. Because the thing is that the stories are the first step, but after the stories come the beliefs. Because once we understand the story, we can analyze and figure out, how did this occurrence, how did these events, how did these things happening in my life make me feel about myself, make me feel about the people around me, the world around us? How do they make me see myself? How do they make me see everybody around me, all my relatives, my family, my friends, my colleagues, my boss? How do they make us feel about what we can and cannot do in the world? And if we go back to that story, this guy sitting at home trying to figure out how to be a dad while his wife is out working and being successful started creating story in his head about what he can and cannot do, what he might be able to achieve in his life, what he has given up, and what possibilities are no longer there for him. He started creating stories about who his wife is and what is important to her or not. And his wife did the exact same thing, right? But from the other side. She started creating stories about why he feels so disconnected and depressed and why her life is about her work because that's where she was getting fulfillment. They both started creating a perspective of seeing the world that made sense, giving their view, their version of the story, but they never shared. They never sat there in the middle and had the entire discussion. And the thing is that in the end, those experiences, they create the lens through which we see the world. But just like in everyday life, if we don't stop, sit back and think about it, if we don't process, we just take that lens, we take that perspective as truth, as reality, but it's not. It's our truth, our lens, our reality. And honest exploration is all about finally understanding our true perspective. Because so many of us have simply been reading from a script that's been handed down to us from our parents, our friends, our experiences in life, but we've never really stopped to truly examine the script and question it. But with a little curiosity, we can discover, sometimes for the first time, the actual experiences, the actual events, the actual stories that led us here, and the programming that those stories have left us with. And once we know the truth, we can move forward. But not until then, right? Think back to what we talked about in the beginning. You don't know what tools to apply if you don't truly understand the stories and the perspective that you have on life. And so you might apply the wrong tools and they won't change anything. And then you'll again create the judgment internally that there's something inherently wrong with you because the tools that people told you were supposed to fix you didn't work. John Lennon has this quote, "Being honest may not get you a lot of friends, but it'll always get you the right ones." And for me, when it comes to the honest exploration, radical acceptance, individualized transformation equation, we can end up getting the most important friends of all, ourselves. So I want you to sit back and think. If you feel like screenshotting this and tagging me and DMing, let me know. What stories have existed in your life for years, maybe for decades, that you can go back and do a real honest exploration exercise on and understand, maybe for the first time again, the perspective that these stories have left you with. All right, guys, I hope today was useful. I can't wait to connect with you again next week. Please follow us on Instagram, at Dr. Adi Jaffe for me at ignited.me. And if you want more of this and some behind the scenes information about everything that we do and some more hand holding and some more incredible content, make sure to check out our Ignited VIP membership, where we throw so much more at you, give you so much more help. That's also where we're selling all of our swag right now. If you want hats or mugs or any of those kinds of things, that's the only place that's available right now. Remember always, there are tools to make you feel better. They all exist for you or somebody near you that is struggling right now. They're all there. But first, we've got to understand what's really going on. We've got to do the honest exploration. And next time, we'll talk about radical acceptance. Have a great week. Thank you for tuning in to the Ignited Heroes Recovery Podcast. I really hope you found the information here useful and that we'll see you back here next week. And look, I want to make sure that this podcast is the most useful it can be for you, so please let me know by emailing info@ignited.com if there are any specific topics or questions you'd like to have addressed. As usual, if you like this episode, I would love for you to leave us a 5-star review and rating. Thanks, and see you next week.